Hi ladies, I want to talk to you about being constantly half on. What on earth do I mean by that? Many things. So think back to your first days at school, to those times where you were put in a situation where you had to perform, you had to produce, you had a deadline, and you had to do things a certain way, in a certain format, otherwise it was wrong. And you had to please this teacher. In that state, for a child, you are put into an immediate stress state. And when you're in this state, your brain narrows down. It only sees what is dangerous. It only sees what is needed to be focused on in an emergency situation. It can't see the full perspective in life. Your amygdala gets into a hypervigilant state, and it tells your body this is an emergency. Especially for a child, as soon as you're experiencing that kind of pressure, your innate perception, your innate expansive understanding of the world and the intricacies and the creative elements and the flow and the insights are shut down. You simply have to perform, produce, and please. And each one of us has a different way of going into deep stress depending on what our early childhood programming was. So some people will want to fight and really push through in that angry state. It triggers anger in them. Some of us, we feel cornered and panicked and we want to run away. So that's the fight and the flight. For others, there's also the freeze response, where the parasympathetic nervous system, if you have heard of the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, he explains it beautifully. And basically, in a freeze state, it's a deeper sense of emergency in your body. This is often where we go to when we feel that we have absolutely no options at all. We can't fight, we can't flight. And we are now cornered in a way where our system just starts shutting down. So that's the freeze response, where we just go quiet, we can't think, we can't function, we're simply desperate to get out of that situation and provide what's needed to free us. So each one of us, and then there's the fawning side of the parasympathetic nervous system. Hello, little birdie. Where we literally will go and charm and please and try and get the teacher to give us extra attention, or overlook the fact that we didn't complete our homework on time, or where we can be using our charming demeanors to get ourselves out of a situation. So we all have a different trigger when it comes to stress response. Not trigger, a different response, a reaction when it comes to stress response. And in this state, what's happening in our body is our systems that are focused on regeneration. So our ability to restore damaged tissue, to detox any pathogens, any kind of toxins in our system, to absorb nutrients, to regulate, to come into constant state of homeostasis. So this is keeping our mind calming, keeping our emotions very present in the moment and responsive, fully responsive to our environment instead of reactive. Basically, if we keep going into that stress response, we start numbing out. And on our hormonal side, our adrenals are constantly dripping cortisol, So initially it's like adrenaline on, adrenaline off, adrenaline on, adrenaline off. And when that pathway of stress has been wired enough, we start going into the cortisol dominant state. And in this state, we're supposed to work with cortisol every day. It keeps our blood pressure regulated. It keeps our nervous system calm. It's anti-inflammatory. It regulates our blood sugar levels. It keeps us physically upright, alert, aware, able to function in the world. But when it's in a high state from stress, day in and day out, eventually the adrenals release a little drip of cortisol that they literally can't turn off, and that drip goes through the night. So that's when the stress starts affecting our sleep state. And when we're running in the state for a long time, our cortisol levels can't quite get as high as they need to respond to high stresses, but they also the adrenals can't turn off either. So it's just sort of this semi-tired but wired drip of cortisol into our system all the time. The other physiological things that are happening on this level is our breath is locked up. So one of the theories is that if we were being hunted by a saber-toothed tiger, we would create a very, very shallow, high-chested breath to try and minimize the amount of carbon dioxide being emitted so that predator can't smell and detect us, because that's how predators find their prey, is through the breath, through the smell of carbon dioxide. So we make very, very shallow breathing, so we're just getting enough oxygen in. And some people say that equates to about 17% of our lung capacity is being used when we're in those stress states. So you can imagine how that affects our brain and the rest of our systems. But we get used to it. We can spend 30 years in this cortisol dominant state and think that we're fine and we're normal. But we may be struggling with sleep, we may be struggling with weight gain, we may be struggling with anxiety, and we may be struggling with discernment and ability to set boundaries. We're just constantly in that state of saying yes and trying to produce all the time to give us, it's almost that sense of, if I can just spit out enough production, then I can have a break. But we don't know how to turn off anymore. We've been programmed to not turn off. And our body is in this semi-alert state all the time. And what happens with the breathing is that the diaphragm starts locking up. So often that affects our ability, like we can't really digest big meals anymore. We often lose our appetite and we just eat like a little bird as our solar plexus knots up. And when our diaphragm locks up, then our breathing is inhibited through our belly, and we're not breathing. Our diaphragm stretches down and massages all of our internal organs, keeping our colon nicely fluid, keeping our womb and our ovaries nicely fluid, and very importantly, keeping our pelvic floor in its innate tenacity. So our diaphragm breathes our pelvic floor. So as that breath locks up, we can't do the innate expansion and contraction that the pelvic floor muscles need to be doing throughout the day. They literally need to be breathing, and we can only do that through our conscious breath, or through our relaxed breath. So then we start seeing tight lower back issues, pelvic issues, even knee problems, painful sex, everything. If you think about that tension around your pelvis throughout the day, so for instance, people that are doing other forms of exercise, you may be really struggling to get the dynamics within your legs, or the power in your legs. It really limits the amount of information going below the body. But the main thing is it's no longer able to stabilize your pelvis properly. So that affects everything up the spine and everything down the body. And we then have many problems from that. So for instance, somebody who hasn't had a baby can still experience urinary leaks and just different kinds of pelvic pain and discomfort, painful coccyx, like sitting on your coccyx, and it's just really painful and you can't figure out why. So there are so many levels that this half-on state triggers within us. It triggers tension around our neck and in our jaw because our head is locking down into, it's a protective mechanism if we get hit in the head, to lock down into the back of the neck and lock the jaw so that we're actually protecting our head space, bringing the shoulders up, a bit like a rugby player. So we're protecting the impact on our cervical spine and the back of our head, which is a very vulnerable, exposed space when we're simply relaxed. So yes, what can we do about this? There's many things that we can do about this, but I think the most important part is to realize that we are not regulated. Our nervous system and our endocrine system are not able to turn off the stress pattern. We need to start retraining our brain, our perception, our state of being to turn that off. It's not simply about just taking the right supplements so that you can sleep, etc. We literally have to start using awareness to watch that patterning. I'm in a freeze state again. I'm in a reactive, fear-based state again. Like, oh my gosh, I have to do this thing, otherwise I'm going to die. Or, whatever kind of fear trigger. Watch the fear triggers. Watch the panic. Watch the hypervigilance of needing to people please, and start bringing yourself back into yourself. Create as much quiet space as possible to spend time in nature. This is where we recalibrate. We are from nature, we are part of nature, it feeds us. You can sit in a sand dune and allow your nervous, the moment that your bare feet touch the ground, your nervous system gets the information that you're not in immediate danger. The moment that you lie down on the floor on bare earth, you're getting that information that everything is safe, your nervous system can calm down. So the first thing you're going to do is start spending time in nature, getting your bare feet on the ground, and allow that recalibration. Become aware of your breath. Give yourself space to train your nervous system to be in a calm, open, perceptive, aware state, instead of a panicked, driven, hypervigilant, fear-based state. And it is simply about eating when you need to eat, breathing, spending time in nature, setting clear boundaries. That's really hard. It's really hard because when you're in that state, you can't discern. You can't feel very easily what your needs are. So by simply creating space, simply creating time, you can then give yourself a moment to feel what it is that you are actually needing. What it is, what simple things actually fuel you. And when you can fuel yourself, you can then actually function productively at a much higher level, much higher, because your full capacity is working, your whole brain is turned on, your whole awareness is turned on, but you are grounded, you are calm, you are clear, and you are not using up your resources in every moment from a subliminal state of panic. I hope this is useful. If you want to know more, then I suggest popping over to the Hormone Wisdom Workshop. That is really going to help you create a strong foundation to shift from surviving to thriving. Have a beautiful beautiful day.